Hi everyone, I'm Viola Canales and I'm very excited to be here to introduce you to my new novel, my second novel, Cecilia's Magical Mission. So I want to say a little bit about myself, a little bit about my writing career, and then read a little bit about my new novel. So I grew up in McAllen, Texas, about 6 miles from the Mexican-Texas border. And I shared a bedroom with my grandmother growing up, and she had the dawn of being a marvelous storyteller. Except her stories always scared me to death. She would say, Viola, if you don't stop playing with your dolls at 10 o'clock, they're going to come alive and start dancing on your head at 12 midnight. Or we would be outside on the porch, and it would be getting dark, and she would say, Mija, do you see that green light? And I would say, yes, it's a firefly. Una linterna, she would say, no, mija, it's a bruja. And if you say a prayer, it's going to crash and burn. And there were stories about duendes and chupacabras, La Llorona. And stories were everywhere. They were at sobremesas after meals, when the family would get together, the extended family would get together for quinceañeras and baptisms and weddings and even wakes. But also, my connection and love for my grandmother also made it difficult for me because when I first started school at the age of 6 and I started first grade, entering another world, the world of school versus family. And my family I thought was magical. The trees were alive, the clouds were alive, the stars were alive, the rocks were alive. And first grade was traumatic for me because I spoke no English, I understood no English, and the teacher spoke no Spanish and understood no Spanish. And it was at a time when you were punished if you were caught speaking Spanish even outside in the playground. And I eventually was able to pick up English and actually become the top student when I was in ninth grade. And just like in my first novel, The Tequila Worm, I was offered a scholarship to go to a school and integrate in Austin, Texas. Now, my first book, Orange Candy Slices, was inspired by my missing and entering another world when I went off to boarding school. Because at that time I missed the Mexican food, I missed the music, and all the beautiful culture of the Rio Grande Valley. And my grandmother had died that summer, and so to conjure her up, I started writing stories. And that inspired my first book, Orange Candy Slices. And, I went off to Harvard College and got my degree at Harvard Law School. I was captain in the military. And I continued to write and write and write. And I remember I had also been part of the President Clinton administration, being in San Antonio and getting a call from my mother saying that my father had been taken from McAllen in an ambulance all the way to the Veterans Hospital in San Antonio. When I went to see him, the doctor said that he had terminal cancer and he would have maybe 4 months, but he died in a couple of weeks. It turned my world upside down. And also now going into that other world, the world of grieving, that inspired me to write The Tequila Worm. And with my second novel, Cecilia's Magical Mission, I'm also exploring how a teenager here, Cecilia, is trying to grapple with two worlds. The world of school and being and fitting in as an American, and her community that comes from Mexico and is full of these traditions. And when she turns 14, her godmother says, okay, you have to prepare for your confirmation, which is a rite of passage. And you have to discover your dawn, which is this belief that everyone has a special talent and gift that they're supposed to find and then nourish and then share. And her godmother is this curandera, right? A healer. And her mother's dawn is being a fabulous cook, and she has her own taco truck. And her father is named Antonio, and he's kind of has a gift of finding things. But Cecilia doesn't think she has a dawn, and She doesn't believe in any of this. She thinks it's a fat story that has become a legend. But then her mother loses a child, and that flips everything upside down. And then the community of Santa Cecilia, that is in San Jose, comes together to raise money to send the body back to Mexico so that she can return on the Day of the Dead. And Cecilia does not believe in this. So here I want to read a segment from the novel where Cecilia is having a talk with her grandmother in Santa Cecilia, and the Day of the Dead is coming up, and still Cecilia is grappling with not believing with this, and so she asks her grandmother. Early the next morning, Cecilia and her grandparents sat around the kitchen table having pan dulce and hot chocolate for breakfast. Do you really believe that souls return on the Day of the Dead? She asked her grandmother. Come on now, tell your granddaughter, her grandfather urged. Tell her how your mother went from being the worst heretic to becoming the biggest believer in the Day of the Dead. Her grandmother nodded, then began. My mother was named Josefina and was known throughout Santa Cecilia as a very practical woman. When my father's mother died unexpectedly just days before the Day of the Dead, and he had to travel to Mexico City on urgent business, he gave my mother money to honor his mother on this day. But being the practical woman that she was, Josefina thought the Day of the Dead rituals were just plain silly. That it was wishful thinking or Mexican superstition to believe that souls actually return on the Day of the Dead. So what does she do? She used the money to fix their leaky roof instead. Then one morning, while she sat in her kitchen and darned a sock, she was startled by the continuous ringing of the church bells. That's when she realized what day it was and remembered the promise she had made to my father. But again, being a practical woman, she soon shrugged and went back to her sewing. But as the bells kept ringing, which is the town's traditional way of welcoming its departed souls for their yearly visit, Josefina began to feel the tiniest bit of guilt. She glanced around and noticed the nopal cactus right outside the window. She got to her feet, grabbed a knife and plate, stepped outside and lopped off a big cactus pad, thorns and all, and plunked it on the kitchen table. She then snatched a picture of her late mother-in-law, set it next to the cactus paddle, and lit a candle. After that, she went back to her sock. Days later, she answered the front door and found her husband glaring at her with spooked, bloodshot eyes. Thinking he was having a stroke, she grabbed him by the arm so he wouldn't fall, but he pushed her off and demanded to know what she had done to honor his mother on the Day of the Dead. Stunned, Josefina feared that if she told him the truth, it would surely kill him. Therefore, she looked him square in the eye and said that she had prepared not only a pot of pozole, his mother's favorite dish, but also turkey mole, her second favorite. She said she bought her favorite flowers, the whitest candles, and had even made an altar where she had placed her picture and presented her with all these offerings. Somewhat satisfied, my father lumbered over to the kitchen table and dropped into a chair. And after he drained his second cup of strong coffee, he sat up, rubbed his swollen eyes, and said in a barely audible voice that on his ride home, in the middle of nowhere, he spotted what looked like an old woman walking in the distance. As he got closer, he could hear her crying. So he hurried his horse over and asked if he could help her in any way. The woman stopped and slowly raised her head and looked straight at him. That's when he fell off his horse, shocked to see the face of his own mother, clutching a thorny nopal to her chest. And then she disappeared right before his eyes. I am very excited to share this story with you, and I hope that you read it. And like this letter I got from a 7th grade student in Alamo, Texas. She said, I love all your books, but my favorite one is Cecilia's Magical Mission. I like this book so much because it not only helps you find your religion, but it also helps you find who you are and who you want to be, which is going to be a big part of your future. Take care and have a great day.